Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument, hosted by the militant, Marxist, anti-Santa, Martyn Bradbury. The Bradbury Group is streamed live on Rover, Sky TV, YouTube and Facebook. Proudly sponsored by Aotearoa, journalism you can trust. Let the arguments begin.
Kia ora Aotearoa, the true demarcation of power in a late-stage capitalism, liberal progressive democracy is the 1% richest, plus the 9% enablers, versus the 90% rest of us. And once you see politics through that lens, the left can never lose an election again. Welcome to the Bradbury Group Election 26, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. I'm your host, the editor of the daily blog, Martyn Bradbury. Bomber to my comrades, Mr. Bradbury if you're nasty. My pronouns are us and we. Coming up on this evening's show, the political panel all-stars tonight are Green Party candidate Tania Waikato, former National and New Zealand First MP Tau Henare, and former Labour leader David Cunliffe. Tonight's 1-on-1 in 10 is the co-leader of Te Pāti Māori, Debbie Ngarewa-Packer, on how Te Pāti Māori ensure this is a one-term government and the demographic impact of a change in the Māori electorates. Our extra 1-on-1 tonight is Greenpeace leader Russel on the impact of climateflation and the reality of El Niño this election. Shout out to Kiwi Skirt and Kiwi Bird for moderating tonight's YouTube page. Good evening to all the Bradbury Easters online watching right now. You make this show one of the most watched live podcasts in New Zealand, and your comments will appear on screen as we go. Shout outs to our Wātea, Facebook, Rover, Spotify, Apple Podcast and Sky TV whānau. Remember to like and subscribe because that's all that is holding the fourth estate together right now. And our Twitter panel this evening is Tim Selwyn. He'll be tweeting live online at Twitter, hashtag the Bradbury Group. There's half a dozen people who make this show happen, and there are heaps of people in the studio, and we have to give a round of applause to Will because it's his birthday. Oh, the studio is going crazy. Look at that. Before all that, however, is this week's War on News. Brothers and sisters, it's day 136 of Trump's 3-week war that he's already won 17 times, and we've gone from Trump calling the Iranian leadership very rational people who were nice to deal with while the MOU was being signed to now calling them cuckoo, evil, dirty scum after the MOU predictably fell over and the war is back on. At this point, Trump is less the president of the United States and more that mate who keeps dragging you back into their toxic relationship dramas by tagging everyone into their latest social media overshare. For everyone keeping score at home, the process has been this so far. Week 1, I've won. Week 2, I've won again. Week 3, I've won so many times, you should all help me win some more. Week 4, why aren't you helping me win more? I'm going to punish anyone who isn't with me helping me win. Week 5, I'm pulling out of NATO because you won't help me win. Week 6, I'm going to eradicate a 6,000-year-old civilization and promise to cause war crimes. Week 7, I'm getting bored of this. Week 8, I've won so many times, I'm now going to invade Cuba. Week 9, this is an AI picture of me as Jesus. Week 10, that picture was actually of a doctor. I'm so bored of winning. Weeks 3 through to 14, I'm really bored now. Let's have a cage fight. Week 15, I have totally won. Here's $400 billion in your bank account. Week 16, I love these Iranians. Very good negotiators. Week 17, I got FIFA to overturn a red card. Week 18, war again. Week 19, they are cuckoo, evil losers. We are never, ever getting back together. The straits are now closed again. Oil is skyrocketing in price again, and the only military option for Trump is actually invading Iran while carpet bombing Tehran. Remember, this entire fiasco of an illegal war was created because Trump was desperate to get the Epstein files out of the headlines. Let's never forget that. This is the greatest political blunder since Vietnam, and our Prime Minister wanted to initially support it, which looks even worse now that a new intelligence report out last week shows the Americans were in such a rush to bomb Iran They used old intelligence that was out of date, and that's why they bombed an Iranian girls' school, killing 150 students. When directly asked about America and Israel bombing a girls' school at the time, our Prime Minister said, and I quote, "That is up for the US and the Israelis to present what has happened there." As if bombing a school might be justifiable in some circumstances. Okay, well, we now know it was a colossal cock-up, so maybe the Prime Minister might want to denounce bombing a school in haste using the wrong intelligence, or is it still a moot point for the Prime Minister? I, like 99% of us, come from the school of thought that thinks bombing any school is a repugnant war crime, whereas Chris Luxon is part of the 1% who wants to give those doing the bombing the benefit of the doubt. Talking of benefit and doubt, David Seymour announced today that veteran broadcaster and man with very questionable tastes in hats, Paul Henare, is now running for ACT in what is a strategic move of brilliance. ACT's redneck, cross-burning, racist jamboree routine has just been a bit too fascist glee club for the New Zealand electorate. Kiwis like their fascism casual, and ACT's gang of ghouls have just been trying too hard to goose step. So bringing in a clown parrot like Paul Henare for some garden variety racist dad jokes is the perfect inoculation to po-faced genocide cheerleaders like the insufferable Simon Court. Paul Henare is the perfect whitewash for ACT's brown shirts. He's sucked on the public teat for his entire career and now wants to privatise it all, which is very on brand for the ACT party. He's pulling the ladder up behind him because there's a short ass who needs it to sit at the table with the grown-ups. Paul Henare joining ACT is like finding out the fireworks factory hired a professional arsonist. ACT's campaign slogan is now less government, more Paul. And finally this week, I never thought heterosexuality was a handicap, but then I saw this candidate from the Conservative Party. Meet Helen. Her pronouns are Karen, and I want to speak to the manager. She's an aggressively white heterosexual woman standing for the deeply religious Conservative Party. Her entire policy platform is, I have a heterosexual vagina. Now, while we all love heterosexual vaginas, I'm not sure having one is enough for political representation, to be frank. No campaign has ever screamed missionary position quite like this one. She looks like a character from the Handmaid's Tale prequel. She's promoting three things she doesn't have any control over as the reason to vote for her. How lazy have the reactionary religious right become, thinking this policy platform will fly? Voters want to know how they are going to pay the bills and a cost of living crisis. Being a white, straight, angry woman doesn't really help them answer those questions. Thoughts and prayers. The political panel all-stars up shortly, whānau, but first this week's 1-on-1 in 10 with co-leader of Te Pāti Māori, Debbie Ngarewa-Packer. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful. Can you hear us, Debbie?
I can.
Excellent. Debbie, the latest RNZ Reid poll is out and it shows how razor close this election is going to be. Māori voters and the Māori electorates have been the most tactical voters in the MMP environment. A TPM candidate vote, while recycling the party vote to the Greens, creates an overhang and will push the Greens above New Zealand First. If we really want this government out, tactical voting by Māori in the Māori electorates is the only pathway to victory for the left, isn't it?
I think, first of all, our focus has always been, and the reason that we have a situation where we have rangatahi now going straight into the Māori role, the reason why we're now in a situation where we have more Māori on the Māori role than the general role is because we've had this absolute singular focus, which is to get our people on the Māori role. And we'll stay disciplined and focused on that strategy because it's working. And I think it's really important that we don't get distracted, and the whole politics of distraction while we're watching the big parties, up and down. I mean, who cares? The reality is that we know that it is going to be the smaller parties that are going to be the decision maker, and we have to push that our people's votes matter. This is the most influential time for them. So again, based on the fact that we've had this singular focus on get on the Māori roll, and that will continue to be a strategy where we go in and make sure that the non-voters, those who are new voters, the hundreds of thousands that are not voting, turn up. And that is what's going to be able to give Māori a stronger influence in changing this government.
When will Te Pāti Māori release its voting strategy for this election?
You just heard the major part of our voting strategy. Our voting strategy has always been about activating, and the sleeping giant in Aotearoa politics is activating the hundreds of thousands of Māori who aren't voting, who don't feel valued in a lot of the other parties and what they're offering. And so that has to be our major focus. We're aware, obviously, the second part of that is to win the Māori electorates, because we're aware of what the overhang does. But for now, our singular focus must be certainly up until August the 6th on making sure that we get as many of our whānau to be on the Māori roll and to realise the power that they have to have influence in this government. We've never been a movement that's, triannually focused on elections. We're about growing the Māori influence, entrenching te tiriti, promoting Māori-led solutions, and that's got to be our discipline and very intentional strategy at the moment.
The latest data from the Electoral Commission shows the majority of Māori are on the Māori rolls, but it also shows an enormous demographic surge from young Māori enrolling onto the Māori roll in a way that changes the age dynamics of the Māori electorates. TPM scored a phenomenal victory last year in the Tamaki Makaurau by-election with the Social Media First campaign. I put to you, there is an enormous cohort of young Māori on the Māori electorates who are invisible to the mainstream pollsters and could cause real surprise this election. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I know that the by-election has been attributed to a real, social media campaign, but it has to go hand in hand with kanohi kitea and being on the ground, being seen as relatable and relevant. You can't ever dismiss those parts in any campaign. And so, we'll continue to do and carry our weight on again. And I say this often, we see it in different candidates, but as a party, our whole strategy has been to always push the Māori roll, because we know that there are, 300,000 of our population that are under the age of 17.
Right.
We've got another 300,000, I think, between 18 to 39. And so we can't, dismiss the significance of the younger votes and the fact that they have a right to be participating, and they have the power to determine and get rid of this, revolting government. And so it's not, and I see a lot of politics is about, scrapping for each other's votes. For us, it's actually about making sure that we remind our people of their power, of their mana, and what it is that they can change. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And Māori are a young and growing population. So elections need to show that they're going to be relevant for the 300,000 that are coming through as a growing population as well. It's
a phenomenal demographic that you've got there. 70% of the Māori electorate are under the age of 40. And if you're getting them onto the Māori electorate and the kind of numbers that we're seeing, that really does spell, I think, a real challenge, doesn't it, for Labour's dominance in those electorates?
Yeah, I'm not here to talk about any other party. I can only talk for ourselves. We've had some of the biggest parties that have been in existence for 111 years, 44 times they've been in government, and Māori are still here today. Yeah. So, we have to focus on what it takes for Māori to be influential, to have the power, and to always be determining this government. This shouldn't just be, we want the Māori votes this year because they're going to be tactically better for us. It has to be something that's relevant and important, because we have seen the clawback of te tiriti, we've seen the clawback of our tangata, our taiao, and those are kaupapa that we need to be able to focus on as Māori. As Māori, we've always had an intergenerational focus, and so that's from the moment we got in. These stats, by the way, of Māori growth are not new. They have been coming through for a very, very long time, and we saw that in 2017 to 2020. So it's always been, again, our focus is to bring our people forward and to remind them of who they are and what it is that they have the power to determine. And more so could they never be so much more influential than they could be this year. And like I say, getting rid of this revolting government. So, those are, you asked me, I think, of the question, what are our strategies? Well, koira, that's it. We've never been secret about it. Our role has always been about activating. We've activated for the last 5.5 years across multiple kaupapa, and we'll continue to stay extremely disciplined as a party on encouraging our people to get on the Māori roll.
I've been commentating on New Zealand politics for 31 years. I've never seen a right-wing government ram through 57% of its legislative agenda by misusing urgency to rob real democratic oversight of their incredibly controversial policies. They have strangled off the common good for their donors' interests. What do you believe we will see if National, ACT and New Zealand First get re-elected in November?
I will see an absolute disaster like we saw in 1869 in Muru Raupatu era for Māori. We've seen a clawback of so many kaupapa that our people fought for the last 50, 60 years for. So I don't even want to look down that channel because I have to stay optimistic and remind our people of the power of unity. We don't have to all love each other, we don't have to even all agree. But one thing I think that every Māori could say to themselves is that we never want to see the harm created to Māori, to wahine, to takatapui, to our taiao, to workers, to, everyone. And I think this is one of those times where we have to call on our strengths to work united to get rid of this government. Te Pāti Māori, we know what our strength is, and that's what we'll stay focused on, and we'll work with those who are also wanting to stay focused on. But we have to be able to also promise on the other side of this that we don't leave our treaty up to be, traded off, and the horse trading that we saw go on the coalitions, that we won't let our hauora and equity issues be traded off, that we won't let housing, education, employment, all these kaupapa be traded off for corporate exploitation and privatisation, all the crap that we see coming down out of this government. So, we know as politicians that we have a big job ahead of us, but we have to also be pono and say that when we change this government, this is what we're committed to doing. And I'm not hearing it from the big parties. And I think that's why it's really important that Te Pāti Māori, Te Pāti Kakariki are in there to hold these bigger parties to task. We cannot afford to lose sight of the bigger picture here for Aotearoa's future.
Abrahama Edwards is a phenomenal candidate for Te Tautokoro. How are you feeling about his chances of taking that electorate in a four-way race?
I feel positive about everyone. I mean, I think, he is phenomenal. You're right. He has a power and a mana. He's just amazing to work with. He's loved on the ground. He was at the Māori National Rugby League in Kirikiri this week, and just everyone was rushing to him. But also, he's a man of huge substance. He has credibility in the taiao kaupapa. He's worked for his people. He's just, we're so honoured to have him, and he's a real humble man. He's really eaty about what it is that he does, and I think that's what's also so appealing about him. He's got a big mahi to do. We're very diverse people. Everybody expects Māori to always agree. Well, we don't. And I think I love the way that he eases into various forums. And he's on a big roadie this week, next couple of weeks, and we're so privileged to have him. Very
He's
honoured.
a superstar. He really is. Finally, comrade, so many whānau are doing it so bloody tough right now. Māori unemployment is 11%. Māori youth unemployment is 19%. 51% of Māori households experience moderate to severe food insecurity. And 16.5% of the total population, about 860,000 Kiwis, are living in relative income poverty after housing costs. Tell those people why it is so important they are enrolled and they vote this election.
It's so important to be enrolled and to vote in this election because the people who created your harm do not deserve to be sitting in those seats. They are not fit to be able to look after you or our nation. And I urge you, please, to get enrolled, to turn up and help the rest of us, because it's the power of the people that are going to cease this pain. The power of the people have done some brilliant things in the past, and I know one-term governments don't happen a lot, but also we're a nation that has punched above our weight in so many times, and I think this is one of those times, whānau, where we really have to get them out, and there is nothing else that politically matters. So if you could please turn up and get them out, and then we will make sure we never have a repeat of the kind of trauma that they've created, because it's going to take a long time to be able to fix.
Preach. Thank you, Debbie, for your insight and oversight. We will talk to you again next month. Thank you, comrade.
Ngā mihi.
Cheers. The political panel All-Stars up shortly, whānau, but now this week's extra one-on-one and 10 with Greenpeace leader Russel on climateflation and the reality of El Niño this election. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Kia ora, Martyn. Thanks for having me on the show.
Comrade, your leadership and the activism Greenpeace drives are so important right now, especially when we have a government who have bent over backwards for the big polluters and their rich speculator mates. You have argued this government has waged a war on the environment. How have the last 3 years been?
I mean, it's been a very difficult 2.5, nearly coming up to 3 years. I mean, if you care about climate change or you care about biodiversity, we've had a government which has been absolutely relentless. It's every week they're coming up with new policies, new legislation they're ramming through Parliament on climate and biodiversity. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a very, very challenging 2.5 years. But I mean, on the other hand, I mean, we've seen a huge fight back. So we've seen it on bill after bill. I mean, the Conservation Amendment Bill, I haven't seen the final numbers. I mean, we had, 30,000 plus just through our, it's tens and tens of thousands of people. And which, when you think that this is coming at the end of this pretty challenging 3 years, I think shows that people are still willing to stand up and fight. We've got the March for Nature coming up on September 19.
Yes.
So people are not willing to give up on New Zealand in spite of the last 2.5 years of attack on nature and climate policy.
We have this insane situation where the big polluters were caught out providing the government secret policy advice to kill off Mike Smith's legal challenge to them in court, while at the same time the most powerful El Niño in 150 years is brewing and looks to peak over New Zealand. How much of a political disconnect do we have to the climate reality we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it is a remarkable thing. I mean, really what's happened is there was a period, some years ago now, where a lot of elements of the political right and within the corporate world globally decided that they were taking climate change seriously.
Yeah.
And so there was a kind of golden period where it looked like climate change would be a bipartisan issue, and it looked like major corporations were willing to take action and take it seriously. But what we've seen over the last 5 years is a reversal of that. And so the political right have associated themselves with climate denialism or climate delay, which would probably be a more accurate description of the current National Party leadership. And so we've found ourselves in the situation now where ridiculously climate change has become a partisan issue, which it should never have become, but it is. And the political right have associated themselves with climate denialism and climate delay. So that is extremely problematic.
The ASB's economists last week argued the Iran war had been settled and that economic growth was back on track, but nowhere in their analysis did they factor in the coming El Niño. The last 3 El Niño events have cost us $12 billion. Apparently, the worst one in 150 years won't cost us anything. Why is the economic impact of climate change being ignored in the run-up to the election?
It is puzzling, but I mean, I think it really is the story I've just told. So within the corporate world, I mean, let's remember Fonterra and Z Energy, who just did this process whereby they were secretly negotiating with Luxon to block citizens' right to sue Fonterra and Z Energy for the harm that their climate emissions are doing. They are part of a climate leadership group, right? So that there is a great big climate leadership group which involves major corporations where some of the very largest members of that leadership group were secretly blocking citizens' ability to actually take Fonterra and Z Energy to court for the harm that their pollution is doing. So, yeah, we've seen this, situation where these big corporates have become this. And maybe we should not be surprised. I mean, if you think about a corporation, it is a machine for making money, period, right? It has no other purpose. I mean, they come up with all sorts of purpose statements, but they don't have any other machines for making money. And so Z Energy and Fonterra are just focused on doing that. And clearly climate change is not something that they're going to take seriously. I mean, I think the best you could hope from them is that they have a free rider approach, which is that they recognize that climate change could be a problem, but they want other people to take action to cut emissions. And of course, if every corporation and every government around the world takes a free rider approach, then we're all doomed. But that would appear to be the best interpretation you could take of New Zealand's large corporates.
Global economists are now warning that a super El Nino weather cycle this year could cause a severe shock to global food prices lasting into 2028. According to analysts at Goldman Sachs, the strength of this El Nino could cause a 15.8% surge in global food commodity prices. Can we afford to remain in denial?
Yeah, I mean, from an ordinary person's point of view, rather than a corporate point of view, this is a systemic and existential risk to us and our children and our grandchildren. I mean, the Thwaites Glacier is starting to break up, for God's sakes. The speed of the ice coming down the Thwaites has tripled over the last 5 years. I mean, this is catastrophic. And it's happening right before us. We have all the information. But obviously, we have a large vested interest, particularly in the oil industry, but also in agribusiness. Fonterra is our biggest polluter by a country mile. And agribusiness and oil and gas industry have a vested interest in blocking action on climate change for their short-term profits. And so that's the battle that we're up against. It is a classic people versus corporate battle. And so we are in the middle of that. And let's remember the successes we had, the oil and gas exploration ban. We got that over the line. The current government's been unable to reverse it. They might have changed the law, but oil and gas corporations aren't coming back because of regulatory uncertainty and civil society opposition. The fertiliser cap has had significant effects. Obviously, Fonterra and their friends are trying to undermine the cap on synthetic nitrogen fertiliser, which is a huge driver of climate emissions. But they're not winning that entirely. So, we are. And then there's the global growth in clean energy, which has been very significant and quite real, even as governments like the New Zealand government have been trying to slow it down. So, I mean, it is a two-step forward, one step back kind of situation we find ourselves in. So we shouldn't be completely gloomy about it, but it is exactly the kind of existential battle that we would expect between ordinary people and corporations who make money by destroying the planet.
Goldman Sachs analysts wrote, El Nino has already begun to affect crops, driving a drier monsoon season in India, with some regions only experiencing 25% of their usual rainfall and parts of central India only receiving 50%, which could affect supply for wheat, rice and sugarcane. What does New Zealand need to do to adapt to those realities? I mean,
I think that the key thing really is our responsibility is to cut our emissions. I mean, that has to be our primary responsibility. We have a secondary responsibility for adaptation. I agree with that. And so we're seeing that all across the country. So lots of places like Westport, and so there's going to be costs in moving them. El Niño, of course, means more droughts, particularly on the east side of the North Island. It'll mean more probably heavy weather in terms of the west coast, heavy rainfall on the west coast and Southland. But and so we need to have things like the Climate Emergency Response Fund that the current government abolished.
Yes.
We need those kind of reserves in place and an adaptation strategy. I mean, you couldn't have done. If you had set about doing the worst possible set of policies, you couldn't have done any more than what the current government's done, really.
Finally, comrade, the Fisheries Amendment Act, which was unbelievably pro-fishing industry, and the plan to allow 60% of conservation land to get sold off have all been kicked to touch until after the election. How concerned are you of a possible second term of National Act in New Zealand First in terms of the environment?
I'm not really a sporting kind of guy, but if I were to use a sporting analogy, it is the bases are loaded for this election, right? So this is a baseball situation where we have players on all plates. And so depending on which way this election goes, and obviously Greenpeace is, doesn't tell anyone who to vote for. That's not our role. But clearly with the Conservation Amendment Bill and the Fisheries Amendment Bill and many other things, but particularly those two bills are now sitting in Select Committee just waiting for the election outcome.
Right.
And so, the bases are loaded. People should be aware those bills aren't dead. Like the government talks about them as if they've disappeared, particularly the Fisheries Amendment Bill. It hasn't. It's just sitting there waiting for the election outcome. So one of the questions I think for National is in post-election negotiations, would they guarantee that the Fisheries Amendment Bill will never come back, even if New Zealand First makes it a bottom line for coalition? That would be a very interesting question to ask the National Party. But the bases are loaded. I mean, and it's not just those. I mean, you've got the LNG import terminal that's just sitting there.
Yes.
That's a multi-billion-dollar bet on fossil fuels and that fossil fuels become cheap.
Yes.
And that climate change doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And you just name it one thing after another. It is quite a consequential election for New Zealand.
Thank you, Russell, for sharing your insight and oversight this evening. All power to your arm. Good luck in your battles, comrade.
Kia ora. Thanks, Martyn.
Kia ora. Okay, now to our political panel all-stars. Our first panellist is a former New Zealand First and National Party politician, the Māori Brutus to Winston Caesar, the unofficial Minister for West Auckland, the one, the only, Tau Henare. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show.
Hey,
one word to describe the week, please, sir.
Great.
That's one short word. Our next panellist is the mighty Tautara Kaori Rimu of the Labour Party Forest. He's a man who refuses to see the wood for the trees. Consultant to the House of Gryffindor, former leader of the Labour Party, David Cunliffe. Kia ora, comrade. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Concerning.
Concerning?
Concerning because of a lot of the things that Russell's just been talking about. The dice is loaded. People have got some choices to make.
And last but certainly not least, she's the remarkable new talent inside the Green Party with a huge social media following on Facebook. I'm not making any jokes at her expense because you never bag a queen. The new Green candidate for Wairiki, Tanya Waikato.
Kia ora, kia ora.
Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, ma'am.
Matariki.
Love it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Brothers and sisters, let's get into tonight's show. Issue 1, what is really happening with the India Free Trade Deal? Issue 2, new RNZ Reid research poll shows how close the 2026 election will be. And issue 3 tonight, will the New Zealand economy turn around in time for the election? Plus, we'll have a final word at the end of the show. Each panelist gets to go to the mountaintop to see who breaches broadcasting standards this week. My money is on John Tamahiri, and he's not even on the show. Let's kick things off with issue 1, and that is the visit by Indian Prime Minister Modi and the signing of the free trade deal with India, which New Zealand First has managed to make into an immigrant-bashing festival. David, Chippy has warned New Zealand businesses that the expectations of $20 billion in investments put into this free trade deal could have fish hooks if the investment doesn't happen. Modi has one definition, Luxon has another. Was National so desperate to sign a deal that they agreed to investment promises that will never be reached?
Yes, there is no binding way that you can enforce the investment aspiration, but both Labour and National agree that having a free trade agreement with the world's most populous country is a sensible thing to do in general.
Follow-up question. New Zealand wants to economically pivot away from China's authoritarian communist regime, but many international and Indian human rights organisations have expressed concerns about human rights under Prime Minister Modi's government, particularly in relation to Hindu nationalism, treatment of religious minorities, civil liberties and democratic institutions. Are we jumping out of Xi's fire into the Modi frying pan?
Look, in the world that we're living in the world where the rules-based order is gone, where we can't cry for the land of childhood to come back, we need to do deals with large, powerful countries that are close to us, that we can export our goods and services to. We have a strong and a wonderful Kiwi Indian population.
Right.
They clearly want closer ties with their motherland, provided we manage it carefully and provided on the immigration side we are taking talent, not just numbers, then I think this will work for New Zealand.
New Zealand First have taken this free trade deal with India and turned it into an immigration bashing jamboree. Is it embarrassing that our foreign minister had to be out of the country when Modi visited?
Can I say, first of all, I'm a real fan of free trade agreements. And like my former colleague, you cannot go to the wall with all these nice to haves and say we shouldn't trade with you, we shouldn't trade with you. In fact, I think we should trade with everybody we can get our hands on. Now, here's the reason, just on a personal point of view. I don't believe anywhere in the trickle-down theory, but I do with free trade, because it does trickle down, because all the businesses that you can get a hold of who can trade with the new partner.
Yep.
Look, what's wrong with trading with India and China and everybody else?
Sure.
And for my former boss to create this illusion that it's that the Indian horde is about to fly into. For Christ's sake, we don't even have a plane that goes from India to New Zealand.
Right.
Come on, be serious.
Yeah. Follow-up question. Do you think, honestly, because you know him, do you think that Winston believes the things he's saying about this trade deal, or do you think he's dog whistling?
I think he believes he's dog whistling.
Love you. Tania, the rise in attacking Indian migrants for taking jobs and housing ignores the fact that none of those migrants were responsible for the poor planning of an economy built upon low wages and exploiting migrant labour. Why is New Zealand First content with playing the race card and not the lack of genuine economic productivity?
Because Winston's made a very long political career out of demonising anybody that he can get his hands on in order to get votes from the people that he knows will vote for him if he says the things that they want to hear. And you asked the question just before whether or not he believes what he's saying. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if it's true. He doesn't care if he even believes it himself. All he cares about is if he gets votes for it.
Follow-up question, wouldn't universal union membership for every migrant worker coming over the border ensure they aren't being exploited, and domestic workers in New Zealand would have certainty knowing they weren't being undercut in wages and conditions?
Universal union membership would be an absolute dream for me, in terms of not just the migrant workers, but for everyone. I think our country lost its way a long time ago when we lost compulsory union membership. And we lost the belief in the power of the people to hold governments to account and to demand better for our workers. And one of the reasons that our economy is in the state that it is in, and that our wages are just completely plummeting and showing no signs of recovering anytime soon, is because our union movement has been absolutely gutted over progressive terms. And I think until we recognise that it is the power of the workers collectively that push wages up, we are not going to see that trend reversed.
In fact, David, we were talking just before the show about the OECD report that shows some of the lowest wage growth on the planet.
The worst in the OECD, minus 6% after inflation in the last 5 years. And that means that our whānau are doing it absolutely tough. And I agree, hey, we need a strong union movement. And that would be better for everyone. Why? Because more equal countries do better.
Amen. Quick round. Will New Zealand have invested $20 billion into India in 15 years? Todd?
Don't have to.
David?
No, but it doesn't matter.
Tania?
No, but I think we can do a bit better in terms of how we manage that relationship going forward.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 2 tonight. And that is the latest RNZ Reid poll that shows how razor close this year's election is shaping up to be, with Labour 34, National 28.7, New Zealand First 11.5, Greens 10.3, ACT 7.8, Top 4.7, TPM 2.3. So, tactical voting by Māori and the Māori electorates could cause an MMP overhang and keep the Greens above New Zealand First. Is it time for the left to use MMP as tactically as the right always has?
Oh, yeah, yes and no. I mean, I always take it from where I am. I'm in Taitukaru.
Yep.
So this year, I'm voting Mariamino
Yes,
as
you are.
the individual.
Yes.
And it might come as a shock to most people, but I'm going to vote for Te Pāti Māori for my party vote.
Love
I
it.
mean, they've been through the ringer, and it looks like they come out the other side.
Yeah.
And who am I to say they deserve a good kick in the ass?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I'll vote. I'll vote Te Pāti Māori.
Good. Follow-up question. Will Paul Henry take more national voters for ACT, and will that see national drop lower?
Yeah, I actually think that 28% is it's still dropping, and I have seen along the way how the right continues to cannibalise itself. They're not growing.
No.
And this is where you win an election, is you actually grow your vote, and most of it is in the middle. It's not from within, you know. And so as Winston goes up, national surely to God will go down, and that's what it's going to look like. I've always said, as God is my witness, or whoever is pulling the strings, might be Santa, this will be as close as we get to a hung parliament.
Yeah. Yeah. Tanya, if the Greens slide to fourth largest party, how much more difficult does that make the case for the Greens to be in the next government?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, to be blunt. I think that these polls have been bouncing around for quite a while
They
now,
have.
and you would have seen just the last poll, you know, the Greens were really strong.
They were.
And
They were.
My own opinion about, you know, the polls in general is that they're not polling our young people. They're definitely not polling Māori and Pacifica in any way, you know, in an equal way that they should be.
Yeah.
And what I am seeing, especially on the ground, is that we've got a lot of young voters coming out, and we've got a lot of people that have never voted before coming out as well.
Yeah.
So like Debbie said earlier in the interview, I'm heavily focusing on getting people enrolled right now, and we're doing a lot of mahi on the ground, going to events just to get people enrolled. I'm giving up time out of my campaign to do that because I understand how important it is to find that missing million that didn't vote at the last election.
Yep.
And I really do think that come November 7th, things will be very different than what this particular poll is showing.
Follow-up question. The government have gerrymandered the enrolment period that typically sees the Greens do very, very well in the specials. How are you in the Greens countering that gerrymandering?
One of the things that we've been doing for quite a while now is we are doing big social media drives in the platforms that we know young people in particular are using. So I'm talking about TikTok and Instagram, not so much the Facebook crowd.
Yep.
And the other thing that we're doing, which I'm spearheading myself, is that we're holding a lot of online workshops and online hui for people that just can't get to them, especially our overseas voters.
Yes.
We've got one tomorrow night, actually. Marama and I are doing an online public call for our voters in Brisbane. And we really are looking at different strategies for reaching the voters that we know are the ones that vote for us and usually vote later, to make sure that they know they have to get enrolled, they have to vote early, and they have to be prepared this election.
David, Chippy has warned voters that a vote for Top might be a wasted vote. But when Labour won an unprecedented MMP majority in 2020, Labour squandered it. Isn't the lesson for voters that Labour needs staunch mates like the Greens, like Te Pāti Māori, and like Top to actually do something other than be incremental performance art?
There are two things that New Zealand needs to change the government. First is they need Labour to be the largest single party. Second, they need opportunity to get over 5% so that we are not reliant on Santa Claus Winston selling snake oil.
Yes.
Now, the second reason we need that, apart from getting the left bloc broadly over the line, and let's remember opportunities not left or right, but they've taken a long-term view, and that's a good compliment. We need policies that will actually deliver for working New Zealanders.
Yes.
So I am hoha on empty slogans. I am hoha on the race card being played to pit New Zealander against New Zealander. I want solutions that will actually work and drive real, lasting change in this country.
Preach.
So Labour needs to grow a pair because it cannot do small target politics and try and land the first time that national government has ever gone out in one term. You don't do that by shimmying your way to the finish line. You have to have a few guts.
Amen. Amen. Follow-up question. If ACT take more from National because of Paul Henry, will we see a desperate leadership coup, a last-minute one, against Chris Luxon? I should be asking Matthew Hooton this because he'd probably be the one cooking it up.
He's too busy being an
I know.
impartial newspaper editor.
We love it.
Who'd have thunk?
I love it. Is Luxon safe if they record lower than 28%?
Look, it's desperate stuff either way.
Right.
Luxon sinks down towards the horrible reality of 25% National's toast. National changes horses right now, a couple of months out from an election.
Yes.
It's toast. Bases loaded.
Right.
Solution, 1, Labour is the largest single party. 2, Opportunity gets over 5%. 3, that the parties of the left combined have a sufficient vote share. And kia ora to the kaupapa betting young Māori and the missing million on the roll. That helps too.
Preach.
But don't forget, if you just want to go to the fringes, as Toe said, most of the votes are in the middle. So you need a left-of-centre government, means a left-of-centre major party. Labour needs your votes too.
Quick round. Will Top get over 5%? Will New Zealand first beat the Greens? Toe.
I think Tops will, and I said to the brother earlier, the only worry that I have with Tops is that, 1, I don't get 3 votes, I only get 2.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: how do you trust a new player?
Yeah.
I mean, I know what to trust.
The old players are so great.
Yeah, well, some of them are. Some of them are, bro. Some of them are. And I'm not
Go
talking
figure.
Labour. You know, my biggest fear is that Chippy is becoming
Keir
Keir
Starmer?
Starmer
Oh,
in front of us, and we need a sort of what we needed was an Andy Burnham's type character.
Yeah.
David over here.
I think her name's Kule Wong.
You could be right, bro.
What will New Zealand first overtake the Greens?
No.
Tanya, your thoughts. Will Top get over 5%? Will New Zealand first beat Greens?
No, I don't think Top will get over 5%, and no, New Zealand First will not overtake us.
David?
Top is going to get over 5%. Opportunity is going to get over 5% every day of the week. We are 4 months out. 3 months out, and they are at 4.5%.
Yeah.
They doubled their vote in the
Close.
last month.
Close, isn't
Of
it?
course they're going to get over 5%. The only people saying it's a wasted vote are those who don't want a new centre player on the field. Labour needs another partner because Te Pāti Māori self-destructed, and the Greens on their own haven't got enough to drive the left over the line.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 3 tonight, and that is the simple question. Will the economy recover in time for the election? Tanya, the New Zealand Council of Christian Social Services has released a new report last week which shows that 10.2% of the population experiencing relative income poverty and over 860,000 Kiwis living in relative poverty after housing costs. Who is the economy working for? Because it ain't working for those Kiwis.
Look, the economy is tanking and it's not going to recover in time for the election. So you can just completely put that out of your mind. It's just not going to happen. And the official cash rate's been hiked now to 2.5% to battle the inflation that we're seeing. And unemployment is trending upwards still, despite everything that this government says it's been doing to counteract that. So it's not working for the working people, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
And as far as I can see, it's not going to recover anytime soon. So I think if National's expecting a Hail Mary to come out of the economy, they're going to be waiting until after the next election.
David, house prices continue to fall and most economists now expect another 2 OCR increases before the end of this year. Will the economy turn in time for the elections? What happens if it doesn't?
Hell no, and it'll contribute to a change of government. The Reserve Bank may not put the brakes on with the Iran war resurfacing, because that's going to drive more shocks, more stagflation. New Zealand's inflation rate is rising. Tanya's absolutely right. Hey, memo to Nicola Willis. Sister, you cannot cut your way out of a hole. You have to grow your way out of a hole. Show us a program for real economic growth based on productivity, savings, and a healthy economy. Don't just try to sack civil servants and then ask why Wellington's falling over.
To, the conflict with Iran does not look as sorted as the ASB Bank economists were predicting last week, and El Niño looks like it is going to smash the farmers. Can Nicola Willis point to the economy as a reason to vote for National, and who wins politically if you can't?
Answer the last part of the question is that the left should benefit from what we're seeing. The 17th war in the Middle East in the last 4 months, and that's what we're looking at, and it goes on and on and on, and it beguiles me to look around the world and saying, well, who's standing up and saying, no, enough is enough?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, enough in Ukraine, enough in Iran. For God's sake, we will hang together as sure as the sun rises tomorrow. Because if one of them decides to go all in, it's all in for everybody.
Yeah, speaker.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah,
and I tell you, put aside your hatred of the old enemy, Russia.
Yeah.
Put aside your old enemy, the Muslims,
Yeah.
the Islamics. Put aside your hatred of Israel, although that's a hard one.
It is.
But, you know, I mean, for God's sake, it's a bit like New Zealand. New Zealand has the opportunity to work together, all of us, in the same basket, or else we will explode.
I'm getting to really like this guy.
Keith, I've always loved him. Keith Locke always used to say New Zealand should be friend to all, enemy to none.
Yeah.
And don't we need more peacekeepers and more peace talkers now than the warmongers?
Look, we have we got a shitload of diplomats out there. What are they doing?
Yeah.
Are they
Lord
talking
knows.
to each other? Are they talking to the Iranians? Are they talking to the Russians?
Kissing Trump, I think.
Oh yeah, look, let's sideline him for a minute,
Please.
and just get on with what we're used to doing.
Yeah.
Which is
I
talking.
remember McKinnon used to do that.
Yeah. Comrades, we need to wrap the show with a final word. To, your final word this week, please, sir.
I have my 2-year-old moko, and he is a delight. He's as mad as a fruitcake. He has got more energy than the energy man himself. But boy, isn't it great that I can get to 65 and spend time on a daily basis, because they live next door, with my mokos. And it's so wonderful.
Beautiful, beautiful. David, your final word this week, please, sir.
I want to remember a great Kiwi, Sam Neill. And one of his last interviews, they said, hey, what's your dream? And he said, my dream is that I wake up one day and I listen to the news and there's nothing happening. People are just getting along. They're just enjoying being together. Soccer or rugby gets played on Saturday, and we just enjoy being together. So on a tautoko tau, we mourn his passing, and we mourn that wisdom, and we need more of it in the world that we live in.
Amen. Amen. Tania, your final word this week, please, ma'am.
Kei te tautoko ai ki tērā. I actually wrote a post today about Sam Neill. He started following me a few months ago, and I went, oh my God, I don't get impressed by celebrities. And the only reason why that impressed me is because he was one of the few people that stands up when there are issues like this that we've just been discussing, and our country seems to have lost its way. and to have someone of his stature with such a kind heart, but still a strong presence and voice, leading our country in these dark times. I know it gave so many people comfort. It gave me a lot of comfort. And it really is a sad day for our entire country to have such a rangatira as him pass at this time. But one of the things that I've taken comfort from in his passing is that he fought to the very end for our people and for our whenua and for our taiao, and that inspires me. So I also would like to pay tribute to the great man, Sam Neill.
Thank you, comrades. And now to my final word, brothers and sisters. We are all heartbroken to hear of the passing of Sam Neill. He was a phenomenal acting talent of a global standing. His roles in Sleeping Dogs, Jurassic Park, Event Horizon, The Hunt for Red October, Dead Calm, The Omen 3, The Piano, Peaky Blinders, and The Hunt for the Wilder People were all such incredible performances. He understood the dark parts of the human psyche and the truth of a moment. Who can ever forget that scene in Jurassic Park when he sees the dinosaurs for the first time? He was an everyman actor in the truest sense of the word. But offstage, his humanity was always available for his environmentalism, and his recent activism against New Zealand First's gold mining project was an example of that. The venom and spite Shane Jones launched against Sam for his criticism of the mining industry was utterly unacceptable, and Sam's friends said the toxicity of the New Zealand First supporters who threatened him took an enormous toll. Sam Neill communicated truth of the human experience. He was a unique acting talent and an incredible human being. We are a poorer nation for his passing. In solidarity, the revolution continues. Ka pai Aotearoa.
The Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. The Bradbury Group is an independent podcast through the Rover Network, sponsored by Wātea News. Everything on the show is an opinion and shouldn't be taken seriously enough to attempt defamation action against us. We were joking. We're never serious about anything. And officially, a small weta in Avondale is legally the owner. Good luck finding him. Don't forget to follow, like and comment.